Dear friends, I'm Professor Filip Kovacevic, and this is the 25th edition of the Russian Newspapers Monitor. I hope you are doing well today. Thank you for your feedback. Please continue supporting Newsbud and independent, people-oriented media. Now, let's take a look at the front page news stories in major Russian newspapers. What is the mood in the Kremlin and throughout Russia this week? Today, we'll begin with Izvestia, the pro-government newspaper, the edition for March 22nd, 2017. In the middle of the front page, there is an article with a semi-mysterious title: "The military planes which crashed into the Mediterranean are cleaned of secrets." The article reports that the Russian Navy conducted a unique deep water operation. According to the article, the deep water drones operated by the Russian military research ship Yantar were able to discover and inspect the remnants of two Russian military planes, MiG-29KP and Su-33, which crashed during the Russian sea operations near Syria last year. The article states that the drones recovered the remnants of planes' equipment, which the Russians consider top secret, as it contains the technology not available or known to the West. The Russian Navy sources describe the operation as delicate and also a complete success. The article noted that two planes belonged to the Russian air carrier Admiral Kuznetsov and were lost during its operations against the Syrian militants. However, neither aircraft was hit by the enemy fire. According to the article, the MiG-29KP crashed on November 13, 2016 during a training exercise, while the Su-33 fell into the water on December 5th while trying to land on the air carrier. The article does not mention anything about the fate of the pilots. According to the sources familiar with the operation, the drones were operated from the Russian military research ship Yantar, which spent about 5 days on a location between Cyprus and the Syrian port city of Latakia. The article reports that Yantar is a brand new Russian Navy ship which started operating in 2015. It is a part of the Russian Northern Fleet, which is responsible for the defense of the Russian Arctic regions. But now there was a need for its services in the Mediterranean. Interestingly, Yantar also operates the most advanced Russian baitskafs, which are self-propelled deep-sea vehicles that can carry human crew. The Yantar's unique construction allows it to stay fixed to a precise location even during strong storms. According to the main editor of the internet project Military Russia, Dmitry Karnyov, Yantar is one of the most advanced deep-sea research ships on the planet. Since the Russian Navy started using it, it already made several visits to the Mediterranean and also the Persian Gulf. In my opinion, this shows the radius of current naval interests of the Russian military. The fact that this article was put on a front page of the pro-government Russian newspaper demonstrates that the Russian government wants to project the image of its navy being back on the international military and geopolitical scene. This is very interesting because traditionally Russia has been perceived as a land power, while the US and Great Britain have been prototypical sea powers. However, during the Cold War, the Soviet Navy, especially its nuclear submarines, represented a formidable military opponent to the West. It appears that now Russia seeks to reclaim some of the Soviet global naval power projection. Russia has spent a lot of money on modernizing its fleet, including commissioning a dozen of new ships. The frequency of its recent naval operations in the Mediterranean, including the one discussed in the article, shows that NATO's plan of closing the sea to all challenges to its authority has failed. In the coming period, I expect to see a much more dynamic naval scene in the Mediterranean, and would not be surprised if Russia soon announced that it has acquired additional naval bases there. Now, let's go to the front page of Nezavisimaya Gazeta, the middle-of-the-road newspaper, the edition for March 17, 2017. In the middle of the front page, there is an article entitled, "Russia and Armenia are uniting their militaries." The subtitle clarifies that while Russia supports Armenia, it also continues selling weapons to Armenia's opponent, Azerbaijan. In this context, it's worth recalling that both Armenia and Azerbaijan were the republics of the former Soviet Union. Below the title of the article, there is a color photograph showing the Armenian Minister of Defense, Vigen Sargsyan, inspecting the Armenian troops. The article reports that the Armenian President Serge Sargsyan recently visited Moscow and met with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. The two presidents decided to raise military cooperation between two countries to a higher level and made the decision to continue the rapid integration of their respective military forces. At the same time, there were reports of the escalation of hostilities between Azerbaijan and the seceded Armenian enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh. According to the Azerbaijani sources, the ceasefire at the line of separation was violated more than 100 times in a single day. The Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, who is on official visit to France, accused Armenia of behaving aggressively and refusing to come to a peaceful resolution of the dispute. According to the article, this is not the first time that Aliyev hinted toward a military solution for the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh. Obviously, this does not bode well for the future of peace in the region. According to the article, Russia has made efforts to mediate the conflict between the two former Soviet republics and is trying to maintain positive, friendly relations with both sides. In fact, it was just before the Armenian president's visit to Moscow that Russia organized a summit meeting of military delegations of the former Soviet republics, in which both high-level Armenian and Azerbaijani military delegations took part. Also, at this time, while in Armenia there is a joint military exercise of Russian and Armenian troops, a delegation of the Russian High Command is in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, to help organizing the International Military Games, which will take place on the coast of the Caspian Sea in the Azerbaijani military base Puta in August 2017. After the meeting of the two presidents, the Armenian President Sargsyan stated that Russia and Armenia are working on uniting their militaries and will jointly set up an anti-missile defense system in the northern Caucasus region. The article notes that the only such agreement that Russia has so far is with Belarus and is conceived as a defense against the massing of NATO troops in the West. The question that is being raised is the following: against whom are Russia and Armenia defending in the Caucasus region. The article also notes that various Armenian and Russian media outlets have reported that Russia sold Armenia the tactical missile systems Iskander, the rocket systems S-300 and Igla-S, and many other pieces of heavy artillery equipment. The ostensible purpose of all these sales is to restrain Azerbaijan's possible hostile activities. However, as the article points out, at the same time, Russia has been selling weapons to Azerbaijan as well. In fact, it's essentially the same types of weapons that it has sold to Armenia. Indeed, some media sources claim that the worth of Azerbaijani weapons purchases in the last few years was $4 billion, which is a tremendous profit for the Russian budget. The article quotes the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu as stating that Russia looks forward to, quote, expanding and deepening, end quote, military cooperation with Azerbaijan. According to the Russian military expert, retired General Yuri Netkachov, who, as an active officer, served in the Caucasus region, this meant that Russia did not plan to take sides in the dispute between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but was committed to doing all it can to lessen the tension, including the selling the same type of weapons to both. Netkachov also stated that the Russian-Armenian anti-missile defense system would not be directed against Azerbaijan, but against Georgia, who has become a very close partner of NATO and has constantly threatened the Russian-supported seceded states of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. The anti-missile system could also protect Armenia and Russia from other potential NATO hostile activities in the region. The rogue anti-Erdogan forces within the Turkish military and intelligence services could do quite a lot of damage in this respect if they ever get the chance to have an upper hand. In my opinion, ominous tensions are building up throughout former Soviet republics on the Russian borders. Violence is threatening to break through the fragile surface of the post-Soviet peace. Many people have been impoverished and are in despair, the easy targets for nationalist demagogues who want to protect their ill-gotten billions by diverting public attention to alleged foreign enemies. The Atlanticist geopolitical camp is back in the political ring. NATO forces, their intelligence branches, and their ideologues, such as Robert Kagan, Victoria Nuland, and Alexander Vershbow, have only been temporarily silenced by the unexpectedness of Trump's victory in the US presidential election, and are now back again on a warpath against Russia. They're planning a lot more operations like Gladio, and perhaps one of them will take place in the Caucasus region. This means that the odds for an overall US-Russia détente are shrinking fast. The situation in Ukraine is getting worse by the day. Both sides to the conflict there, as I reported in my previous podcast, are taking measures that openly violate the Minsk Accords. Either there will be a new deal soon or a new proxy war. Unfortunately, the latter option appears to be more likely. Let's stay with the same newspaper, Nezavisimaya Gazeta, and take a look at the front page of another edition, the edition for March 20th, 2017. On the bottom of the front page on the far left, there is an article entitled, NATO is looking for a way to go around the Montreux Convention. The subtitle explains that NATO is planning to have a permanent presence of its ships in the Black Sea. The article reports that NATO in cooperation with Ukraine, is increasing its naval presence in the Black Sea. It states that 4 NATO ships recently arrived to the port of Odessa to conduct joint exercises with the Ukrainian Navy. The commanding ship of this NATO group is from Poland, while the 3 others are from Germany, Spain, and Turkey. The article notes that according to the Montreux Convention, all NATO ships, except the Turkish one, have to leave the Black Sea after 3 weeks. However, the big question remains as to they will really do so or not. According to the article, what may happen is for the Navy ships of NATO member states to be donated to Ukraine under the justification of strengthening and modernizing Ukrainian Navy. In this way, the US and NATO ships could continue to operate in the Black Sea under the Ukrainian flag, and they would not formally violate the Montreux Convention. In fact, the Ukrainian media has also reported that Ukraine would soon receive from the United States 2 island-class patrol vessels, which could be used to put pressure on and harass the workers on the Russian oil platforms in the Black Sea. In fact, 2 similar ships have already been donated to NATO-friendly Georgia in 2016. The article reports that the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, Stepan Poltorak, came to Odessa to meet with the NATO ship's commanding officers. He was accompanied by the military attachés of NATO member states posted to the Kiev government. This makes it clear to what extent Ukraine is being informally integrated into NATO. There is no question that the Kiev government is ready and willing to implement any anti-Russian NATO project, even at the expense of the political and economic stability of the country. This is not good for the future. In my opinion, it is interesting to see that the Turkish Navy ship Alanya is taking part in these exercises, and presumably the Turkish military attaché is also involved. My question is, how does this square with the recent very friendly and productive visit of the Turkish President Erdogan to Moscow and the economic deals he signed with the Russian President Putin? On which side is the Turkish government really? NATO's or Russia's? Or is it playing one against the other? There is even a possibility that their participation in NATO exercises is actually encouraged by the Russians, so that they could receive the operational information from the inside. The article concludes by pointing out that the NATO exercise in the Odessa region is not the only NATO exercise going on in the Black Sea at this time. In the Romanian territorial waters, there is an ongoing exercise under the name Spring Storm 2017, in which the US ship Carter Hall, which is a Harper's Ferry-class dock landing ship, is taking part, and it has a battalion of Marines Special Forces on board. At the same time, in the nearby Bulgarian territorial waters, the French missile frigate Lafayette is leading another NATO Navy exercise. As I pointed out earlier, this means that NATO is not planning to diminish its pressure on Russia and is not backing away from its anti-Russian agenda. It is not known where and when the next incident bringing the 2 sides to a more serious open conflict will take place. It could be in Ukraine, the Baltics, the Balkans, Syria, Libya, or, as we have seen in this article, in the Black Sea. Or it could be in cyberspace, or even in the outer space. But what is becoming more and more certain is that such an incident will indeed happen, and perhaps even by this summer. Now, we'll take a look at the front page of Kommersant, a leading Russian liberal newspaper, frequently critical of the government's economic and foreign policies. The edition for March 17, 2017. On the bottom of the front page on the right, there is an article entitled "Russia and Japan will meet in the group of four." The subtitle explains that for the first time since 2013, both the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and the Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu will arrive in Tokyo together to meet with their Japanese counterparts. The article reports that Lavrov and Shoigu will meet with the Japanese Foreign and Defense Ministers on March 20th. This meeting is a direct result of the December 2016 summit meeting between the Russian President Putin and the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. This particular format of talks was frozen after the Russian takeover of the Crimea, and I find it very significant that it was again restarted at this time. According to the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Igor Morgulov, quoted in the article, the ministers will discuss, quote, the establishment of a new architecture for security and cooperation, end quote, in the Pacific. It is very interesting that Japan discusses an issue of this kind with Russia without the supervision of the United States. This means that Japan is slowly and surely trying to develop its own autonomous path for foreign and military security policy. Japan wants to influence Russia into resolving the issue of the southern Kuril Islands in its favor, without the help of the United States. According to an anonymous Japanese source quoted in the article, the situation around the Kuril Islands has recently taken a more ominous turn because both sides seem to be increasing the military presence in the area. Japan is building up its anti-missile system, and this is, according to the article, becoming a source of concern in the Kremlin. Heavily involved in the anti-NATO efforts on its western border, Russia would definitely want to avoid any complications with its eastern neighbors. And indeed, not even during the World War II did Japan attack Russia, and this allowed Stalin to relocate quite a few Red Army divisions from the east to the Western Front, which made an indispensable contribution to the victory over the Nazis. However, the article also notes that the Russian military is bringing in more troops and equipment to the islands. A source from the Russian Ministry of Defense stated that Russia is strengthening all its borders and, quote, it cannot be that Russia has 3 divisions on its western borders and not a single one in the east, as the Japanese one, end quote. And so obviously there are some tough negotiations awaiting the Russian Defense Minister Shoigu, who, according to the article, has not been to Japan since 2013. As far as the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov is concerned, the article reports that he will probably ask the Japanese counterpart about the recent talks between the US President Donald Trump and the Japanese Prime Minister Abe. In addition, it is likely that the recent Japanese proposals regarding joint Japanese-Russian economic projects on the Kuril Islands will also be discussed. In my opinion, it is very significant that, considering the low point in its relations with the official Europe, Russia is becoming more and more welcome in Asia. Abandoning its Western allies, Japan seems to have removed the issue of the Crimea from the top of its agenda, as harming the possibility of a substantial strategic cooperation with Russia. Many observers point out that it is China, rather than Russia, that is seen by the Japanese as their main geopolitical opponent, and that therefore they would like to have Russia remain at least neutral if it cannot be a public ally. However, it may be difficult for this Japanese diplomatic strategy to bear fruit, considering the recent close political and economic cooperation between Russia and China, especially in terms of the large natural gas and infrastructure deals and regarding military and intelligence cooperation within the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. However, from the frequency of the meetings between Abe and Putin, as well as the meetings of the top government ministers, including this one, it is easy to see how hard the Japanese have been trying. Lastly today, let's take a look at Pravda, the Communist Party newspaper, the edition for March 21st, 2017. You would never find out from the US mass media, but the Communist Party is the largest opposition party in Russia, with millions of members and sympathizers throughout the country. Their activists and activities represent the only genuine challenge to the Putin regime, and not the exiled Russian billionaire oligarchs with Western European and US citizenships, or the liberal organizations and individuals they and the US and NATO intelligence finance in Moscow and St. Petersburg. If the political and social change in Russia is possible at all, it can only come through the political radicalization of the communists. The front page of Pravda for March 21st, 2017 is a definite proof of that. On the upper half of the front page, there is an article with a title in big black letters. Capitalism is bankrupt. We want socialism. The subtitle explains that the communist organized protest activities took place throughout Russia on March 17 and March 18. The demands of the protesters were directed against the policies of the Russian government of Vladimir Putin and Dmitry Medvedev. The protesters demanded the decrease of prices and tariffs and the return to the social services and programs provided by the state during the days of the Soviet socialism. Below the title, there is a photograph of one of the protests, which took place in the Russian city of Samara. The photograph shows a group of protesters, mostly middle-aged and elderly, and two of them are holding a big sign that says no, "Нет," to the price increases. The entire article, in fact, consists of reports which the Communist Party organizers sent from various cities in which the protests took place. The first report was from Samara. It stated that about 2,000 protesters demanded the resignation of the governor Merkushin, who was appointed by the Russian President Putin, as well as the mayor of Samara, Oleg Fursov. This was a clear political stand against the policies of the Putin-sponsored political party United Russia and its officials. The protest activities also took place in Rostov-on-the-Don. The newspaper provides a photograph from this protest as well. The most visible political slogan was directed against the corruption of the officials in charge of the city energy supply. The protesters demanded the resignations of the corrupt officials, all of whom come from the Russian ruling political party. Judging from the photograph, it appears that the crowd in Rostov was younger than the one in Samara. In the article, there were additional reports from Omsk, Khabarovsk, Saransk, Tambov, Krasnoyarsk, Ryazan, Chelyabinsk, Tomsk, Kirov, Novosibirsk, and even from Sevastopol and Simferopol in Crimea, essentially from all major cities and regions in Russia. And these are the places which are thousands of miles apart. And so, beyond any doubt, the number of protests and their geographical distribution demonstrates that the growing dissatisfaction of the major part of the population with radical capitalist economic changes initiated by Gorbachev in the late 1980s, intensified by Yeltsin in the 1990s, and continued by Putin into this decade. By organizing these protests, the Communist Party definitely displayed its growing political power in Russia. In my opinion, this means that Putin will have to make some serious modifications in the government policies. He will probably do so by removing the few remaining advocates of economic free market liberalism and free trade from the government, and developing a more socialistic government orientation. We may see the growth of the state direct investment in the Russian manufacturing and agriculture, and even more state control of the vital resource base. It is clear that Putin will need to appear even more of a populist than until now in order to retain his popularity at a high level. And, as I've said many times, he will of course need to replace Dmitry Medvedev as the Prime Minister of Russia. While there is no doubt that Putin has enough votes to get elected president again in 2018, his successors will have to make many compromises with the communists unless they want to provoke another Bolshevik revolution. It will be interesting to see what side the Western political forces will take in the coming months. The focus on the liberals and the so-called Western-type Democrats is a policy that has failed and that cannot be revived. And so the Western establishment doesn't have many options. Its incessant demonization of Putin puts it on the same side with the communists. Is it something that the West really wants? Are the Western officials that ignorant of the basic realities in Russia? I would not be surprised of that, because people always see what they want to see and not what really and objectively is going on. Or perhaps it's just pure cynicism, playing one side against another until the entire country collapses into chaos and social anarchy. Is the breakup of Russia the ultimate agenda? Dear friends, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting Newsbud. And of course, be cool and stay cool until the next edition of the Russian newspaper's Monitor.
For just a small subscription fee, you can become a member of the Newsbud community and help keep this website running. Your subscription will provide you with full community access to exclusive content, including videos and articles from Newsbud's team of experts and analysts, as well as a members-only monthly newsletter from Newsbud's founder, Sibel Edmonds. Sign up today for full access at newsbud.com.